W- Welcome to hell or heaven. So back in 2018, I did a Blender talk where I talked about how I'd never really tried making CG grass because I felt like unworthy, or I felt like it was too complicated. I was like, I will never be able to harness the perfection and chaotic beauty of grass. But 5 years later, I decided to give it a shot, and it turns out that I was totally right, because this past week has been insane. And a lot of that's because I didn't really make it easy for myself. I wasn't trying to make one type of grass. I was trying to make like the platonic ideal of grass. I wanted to be like realistic, but also kind of like arty, and I wanted it to feel like luminous when it was backlit by the sun, and kind of soft. I also wanted like when you see the gusts of wind approaching you across like a field of tall grass. This is basically more tall grass than just grass. That was really my focus. But yeah, just a heads up, it's exactly what you think. It's generating millions of blades of grass until your computer gets bogged down, and maybe even beyond that. But I try to do it in the most efficient way possible. So I'm going to show you how to use the asset, and things I learned along the way, because I made a lot of silly mistakes over the past week. But it's basically as easy as here. Gonna make a plane. I'm gonna make it extra big. Let's make the dimensions like 100 by 100, and Control A, apply the scale. If we want, we can subdivide a few times and kind of use proportional editing, give ourselves some nice little rolling hills like you used to draw when you were a kid. That might be a little much, but we'll see. We're going to append in from our grass asset folder the grass asset collection. We've got all this stuff right here. It turns everything on by default, so I might hide some of this, but I don't think you really have to. But yeah, with that in, we can just select this, go to the particle settings, and add a new one, and change it to grass field. And if we here, I'm gonna just load in an HDRI just so you can see what's going on. And there we go, and it should work great in a lot of different lighting situations, and it's already animated. If you want to change like the speed and intensity of the wind, I've got 3 different presets that I put together that look okay to me. This whole thing's so subjective, though. You know, you can tweak whatever you want. But yeah, with the object selected, go into the particle settings, go down to field weights, and you just change the effector collection. These are the collections of force fields they'll be looking at. You can change it to, heavy, light, medium. Let's go to medium, and it should just update. Yeah, there we go. Oh, and sometimes I like to put an actual, like, picture of grass on the ground plane, just in case you happen to see through the blades of grass. I'll include a little picture I've been using somewhere, so you can use it if you want. Yeah, there we go. So this all started with a discovery a few weeks ago, and maybe it's common knowledge, but I didn't know it. I'd made a photo-scanned model of Tom riding on this bike. I'd set up some a particle hair system on top of Tom's head to give the photo scan some hair. It can add a lot of realism for an otherwise kind of hokey scan. But I was really surprised to find out that some other force fields I had in the scene were affecting the hair. Like, I hadn't even baked the hair or anything. Like, here, let's lock the view to lock view to active. Yes, okay. And you can see the hair is moving, but it isn't a simulation. Like here, if I take this plane, add a new particle system, give it some hair, and check hair dynamics, and maybe put it at a tilt, all of this stuff, it behaves with physics now. We can bake the whole deal, which is fun. We can add wind and all of that, but I always figured that this wouldn't work with grass because it's just too much stuff. You can't have this many grass models all kind of doing things. And I was always thinking, like, maybe you could do it with a cloth sim or whatever, trying to get all of that. But look at this. If we uncheck hair dynamics, the wind still kind of affects the hair. And if we change this to turbulence here, look, the turbulence still affects the hair. And here, let's turn it up and maybe scale all this out, give ourselves a little bit more hair here. So look at that, you can kind of get your gusts moving here. Let's make this even a little bit bigger here. Woo! Yeah, that's great. Also, quick note, I am sure I didn't do this in the best possible way. There's all this other stuff. There's the particle instance modifier, which seems pretty cool. There's the geometry nodes is gonna be absolutely wild. But this is the way I found that I think lets you just do that field of grass thing. Like most of the other methods, I think are a little bit more intensive, so you just can't get quite as many blades of grass, and that was kind of my goal for this one. But if I'm wrong, or if there's any other techniques you guys know of, I would love to hear them, because this has been really fun, actually. And the thing with this is it's not a simulation. With a simulation, you have, you know, a state on every frame that's changing. In this case, there's just a default state of the grass plus whatever values the turbulence is adding on top of it. It doesn't matter what happened on the previous frame or the next frame. It's just the default plus that offset. So you can combine these. You can have this plus a little bit of wind going on, and start to get some kind of like nice stuff that you never ever have to bake. You can update all of it at any time, and it'll just be responsive. And this seemed a lot lighter weight, so I modeled up some grass. And what's funny is this is the part that when I was younger I thought would take all of the time. Here, let's curve this just a little bit. I think the grass is feeling a little bit too straight. But yeah, when I was younger, I thought this would be the bit that would take forever. This took like 0.5% of the total time, because what really took the time was just figuring out how to get those physics so that they really capture the feeling of wind moving through grass. And I'm to the point now where when I walk outside and I see grass blowing, I'm like, ah. Like, okay, so my first test, it worked really well right off the bat, but I realized I'd accidentally made it 4 times too big. It wasn't to scale. And so I tried recreating it, but at proper scale. And I spent 2 days trying to dial in all of the force fields and stuff to make it work at the right scale. And it just wouldn't, ever. And so I finally was like, maybe that's a thing. Maybe it just helps to do it 4 times bigger. I still feel like I'm wrong about that, but honestly, after spending 2 days tweaking force field settings, I'm just letting that be a lesson that I learned, even if that's wrong. This asset is not to scale, so I either make it in a different project and you know, link it in and scale it down, or I scale up everything. Sometimes Blender physics they're just like that. The other problem is I really didn't narrow down my scope. I was trying to make, again, like the platonic ideal, the concept of grass, not any specific grass. So I didn't really have a clear target. I was trying to make, you know, the field of grass. I was trying to make the seaside grass. I was trying to make the grass you see in your yard if you don't mow or whatever. And I get settings that work for one of those, but like didn't work for the other. So as you were looking at those original clips at the beginning, you were probably thinking, oh, I don't like this, or I should tweak this, or something like that. And I'm going to show you how to tweak everything, because the best grass is the grass that's been honed for exactly the situation you need it in. Although, again, I did try to make it nice and drag and drop. So let's start with the practical considerations, because yeah, what you're going to want to be doing is basically generating as much grass as your computer can handle. What's fun is, like, the file size is really small, because it's just, you know, these couple 10 blades of grass. You're just using them a bunch, so it bogs on your computer, but it's not actually, you know, huge. But yeah, if it starts bogging down your scene too much, at the most basic level, you can just go under the particle settings and click this button here. And that'll turn off all of the blades of grass in the viewport, but they'll still show up in the render here. That's what this other button does. But now you can't see anything, which isn't great for designing a scene. So down here under emission, this is how many original blades of grass we're generating across the surface. But if we go down here under children, we're interpolating with every one of those 2,500 blades of grass an additional 120 blades of grass. And you'll see this also lets you control how many are displayed in the viewport and how many will appear in the final render. So if we change this to something like 20 in here, let's turn this back on. We can kind of get a sense of what the grass will be doing, but everything is still fairly usable and things won't get bogged down. So usually I keep this, where do we go? Yeah, this up somewhere pretty high, and this number down somewhere nice and usable, so that everything plays nice. And again, every single one of these things is a trade-off, where you kind of decide which way do you want to go. I originally did a lot of my tests with only like 1,000 blades of grass, and you can see that in the renders. The kind of everything is moving in chunks, as all of the additional children interpolated grass are kind of moving with the main hairs. Everything feels a little bit chunky. That said, that's not entirely bad. There's something to having the grass kind of moving in clumps that can kind of help with the realism. Also, if this number gets too high, Blender starts to chug again, because it's having to simulate a lot of new individual blades of grass, and so relying on the interpolation is really efficient. Here, let me show you. In this test here, I have like 1,300 original blades of grass, and the next one here, I think I have like 4,000, and you can see it just moves a little bit more organically. Here's the first one, and here's the second one. But the second one, the whole system chugged. It was much slower, a lot less fun to work with, and so yeah, I think keeping the number down to like 2,000 something, if your computer can take it, probably a great rule of thumb. And I already showed you that if we go under the field weights, we can change which effector. Here, let's change this to light. And what this means is it's going to ignore all of the force fields that are not in the wind light folder. That said, we can still add more anytime. Like one thing that's fun. Let's add a vortex. Oh, that's really cool. Here, let's turn the max distance to like what, 10? Yeah, maybe 15. And turn the strength up a little bit. Look at that. We got a little crop circle. That's cool. I think if we make this really high, we can get rid of that little peak in the middle. But yeah, that could be fun for doing UFOs or something. Dang, that looks great. But yeah, you have to make sure that the new force fields are in that that folder that's being referenced. Oh, okay. What if you want a path going through the field? Well, here I'm going to select this, turn off the visibility so we can actually get things done, and I'm going to go under weight paint here. And by default, everything should be 1. We're basically making a height map, which means we want to start with the whole thing up here just at 1. And here, actually, I'm going to subdivide this a few times to give us a little bit of a actual resolution. Go back into weight paint, and actually, it'll probably help if we can see about how high the grass actually is. So I'm going to interpolate down to like 10 blades of grass per, or maybe only even like 5, and turn that back on. So now we can see kind of what's going on here. Turn the radius down, turn the weight to maybe here, and I'm going to add this little path. Maybe I'll even turn the weight down a little bit more. Just going through here like this. And maybe kind of like that. We'll have another path going off. I don't know. This might look a little bit weird. These might also be a little bit too fat of a path, but we'll find out. And to use this, it's as easy as going down to vertex groups, going to length, and selecting that group that we just made. And already it's doing a thing. And if we change the children here, let's really crank them so we can see what's going on. Oh, we've got a nice little footpath going through the grass there. I'm really happy with that. And we can always make it a little bit longer too if we want. Oh, that's great. What's nice about long grass is you don't need as much of it. If you have really small grass, it's all going to look really, really sparse. Like that, you can still kind of see the ground plane, which is fine. But yeah, it's almost easier on your machine if you have really big, bold grass like this. No, this is going to look horrible. Oh, it doesn't look great. And oh, let me show you something else here. Let's turn this back off. Fill all this in again. Change the weight down low, make it small, and let's have it come in like this, kind of bend, and go out like that. Will that kind of tile? Turn our grass back on. And look, if we put this in a group, winding grass, we can instance that collection, Shift A, go down to collection, and find winding grass here. And if we tile it, this should be fairly lightweight because it's only figuring out all the grass once, but then it's just showing that same grass situation multiple times. And even still, though, this is probably going to be a little bit intense. But if you want that like grass to the horizon feeling, this is the best way I found for doing that. And now we go back into our original plane here, turn that grass back on, see if our computer explodes. It didn't explode. It loves it. And there we go. We've got our little paths going through the grass. Oh, I like that a lot. I've been in marshlands where they actually do this. It's really nice. And I haven't messed with it yet, but yeah, you can also set everything to 0 and just paint in the specific places where you want grass. Here, let's get some nice big piles going. I know this is nothing new, but it's still pretty fun. Woo! Wow, that's ugly. Also, to keep everything feeling kind of random, like, you know, there's clumps where it's a little bit higher and all of that, and maybe the ground isn't totally even, I have some textures going on. If you go down here under textures, I've got large noise and small noise, and you can access these here, but I recommend, if you're going to be messing with them, to select one and just click this button right here, and it'll take it straight to it in the textures tab, and you can change whatever you want. Here, let's change this to 10. See what happens. Yep, now the noise texture is just a little bit more dense, so you can get any look you want. I think all of that's pretty self-evident. I'm looking at this. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. I think as soon as I upload this, I want to go drive out to some actual grass. I think that's an important thing I should do at this point. Okay. Also, let's talk about materials, because I like these in most cases. And again, they're designed to play with light really good. I've got translucency and some glossiness so that sometimes it'll reflect the light back to you, because you know grass can be kind of shiny. I'm trying to hit all of the different marks with that, but sometimes trying to make everything happy means it's not actually the best it could be. So let's look at the shader stuff real fast. And I think it's pretty self-evident. But yeah, it's all just one material here. In fact, I'll name that. It's called grass. And the two things I usually play with is this is the slider that controls how much translucency you're doing. But I really play with is right here, just the color. Like, I wanted the tips to have, when you're in a big field of grass, all of the grass tips kind of line up, so you get this weird soft layer of just all of the grass seeds. And it's this kind of weird voluminous type of thing that I really like, which means let's experiment with turning the underside of the grass here a little bit darker. See if we can make the top pieces kind of feel like they're floating a little bit more. And yeah, that doesn't look bad. It actually probably looks a little bit more realistic. I just, you know, it's up to your taste. The ground plane is now a little bit maybe too bright. But yeah, just getting the light, just hitting those top bits, that's actually a little bit more realistic. I just, you know, don't like it as much. I'm doing kind of a mid-late summer grass in this one. Here, let's try light green. I haven't done this yet. Yeah, wow, that's yeah, that's nice. That's nice. But yeah, you can play with any of this stuff, you know, anytime. It's pretty basic. In fact, let's make it like kind of a purple. Ooh. Oh, that just looks like a lavender field. Oh, I like that a lot. You'll notice I'm not hitting play. All of this currently is animated, like it has all the force fields affecting it. But because of all the blades of grass, you know, it takes a long time between frames. So I use that for rendering. If I actually want to see what it looks like, I'll usually look at it with fewer interpolated children. And the final consideration, I say as if I won't think of other things to say, motion blur. If you check motion blur and you're rendering with optics and you're rendering high resolution, it takes a long time to build the optics optimization pre-process. Like, it sometimes would take me 20 seconds per frame, and then the actual frame would only take 20 seconds to actually render. If you don't render it with motion blur, it renders a lot faster. Or I think if you're not rendering it quite as high res, that process doesn't take quite as long. But yeah, I was reaching this threshold where suddenly I was just sitting there watching it process for like 20-25 seconds on every single frame, and I thought that was a little bit of a bummer. Oh, and of course you can always go into the turbulence fields, and they're just these empties moving across the scene. But you can always go in under the graph editor and change how fast they're moving here along the x-axis or whichever axis you want, and also under the force field settings. These are the settings I found. I just dialed stuff in for 6 days, but at this point it all feels very arbitrary. Again, I look at everything. I look at a render and I go, oh, that grass is way too chaotic and fast. And then I look at it again 3 minutes later, and I'm like, oh, it's too slow and organized. Even though, like, I haven't changed anything, I'm just in that space where it's like it's whatever mood I'm in. So I'm finally going, I'm just gonna release it, and you know, I've gotten it to the point I'm pretty happy with. Hopefully it works okay for you. But yeah, all right. Hopefully this is useful for somebody. This has been a fun project, even if I was pulling my hair out. And hopefully it runs well on your machine. So yeah, I'll talk to you soon.